Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury, where we break down the complexities of the tax world, making it easier for you to navigate through the numbers and paperwork. I'm your host, Kevin Rosenquist. Thanks so much for being here and welcome, Lance. So great to see you.
Well, great to see you too, Kevin.
So today we're going to talk about just the basics of tax resolution. Let's start by telling the listeners about your experience as a tax resolution attorney. Why is this area of law important to you?
Well, I think it's important to me because I've always been on the side of the little guy versus the government. I first started out as a public defender. I wanted to help people, and I've always thought that what I was doing in terms of tax work was I was saving Fay Ray from the clutches of King Kong, with the IRS being King Kong. Mm-hmm. So that's what attracts me to this type of work, because the government can be so overreaching and people are terrified of the IRS. So I'm the guy that's standing between them and the IRS and protecting them from the clutches of the IRS.
That's a great outlook. That's a good reason for doing what you do. What exactly encompasses tax resolution law, and what is it that is so important for individuals and businesses to understand?
Well, basically, we represent people that have tax liability to the IRS. They're not paying their taxes for a number of reasons, because somebody went belly up on them. They pay their suppliers, they pay their employees. They think they'll catch up next month with their payroll tax, and it just sort of steamrolls and it gets out of hand for them. Most of my clients, 70% or more, are self-employed. Those are the people that get in trouble because the taxes aren't automatically taken out of their paycheck. And so, a lot of these people are great at what they do, but, there's so much government paperwork, there's so much bureaucracy that it's difficult for a lot of these people to know what it takes to run a business successfully. So that's another area that we try to help them in, to get them back on track and to make sure they're 100% compliant with the IRS in the future.
A lot of these people that you're talking about, the self-employed people, do they try to handle everything on their own? Do they not work with like an accountant or something like that? Is that kind of how they end up in trouble?
Yes, that happens quite often. The other problem is they work long hours. Everybody thinks being your own boss is the American dream. Most of those businesses don't make a lot of money. I would say 80% make $75,000 or less. And guess what? There's no pension, there's no retirement, there's no health insurance. All that comes out of that in addition. Yep. So they're making even less when you take that into consideration. And, they work long hours. And the last thing they want to do at 7, 8 o'clock at night or later is to do the paperwork that's required. Mm-hmm. And they just don't understand, a lot of them, about what they need to do if they're in business for themselves, and all the regulations and all the paperwork that has to be done.
What are some common myths or misconceptions about tax resolution that you frequently encounter?
Well, I think the biggest one is people believe that they can do this on their own and they just screw it up. I just got off the phone with a woman. She did it herself. She's got over $35,000 in liability. She's going to have more because she's self-employed. She's now making estimated tax payments. And she's finally come to realize that she can't do this on her own, because she did try to do this on her own with the IRS, and she's just made it worse. And I had another woman who over a year ago told me, well, I'm going to do this on my own. Don't do any more work for me. And I said, okay. She called about a month ago and said, I have just royally screwed this up. I'm making my situation much worse than what it was. You take care of it for me. So I think that's the biggest misconception that there is that this is easy, and it's not. I just have to tell you, when I was a small town lawyer, I did 15 hours of continuing legal education a year. Now, all my attorneys in Missouri and in Nashville, Tennessee, we do a minimum of 50 to 100 hours of continuing legal education a year or more, just to keep up with this, because things are constantly changing. Things changed during the pandemic. They've now changed again after the pandemic. They're always changing the procedures. You're dealing with bureaucracies. They're making more mistakes than they ever have before, the IRS, because they don't have enough people who are properly trained to do the work.
Yeah, it's one of those things like taxes. Like I'm a big proponent of letting the professionals handle things, and taxes are definitely in that category. It's like, so to your point, things change so fast. I mean, who what average person has time to keep up with tax law?
Well, and I have to tell you, when I get lawyers, I get doctors, I never have to convince a lawyer that they should do this on their own, that they need to get help from a professional who does this every single day. They may be great in personal injury or in divorce law, but they know they shouldn't be doing this on their own. But there are people who think they can do this all on their stuff because they think that they can do it, and they find out most of the time that it's just made the problem worse.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, but with small business owners, especially if you're a solopreneur or something, you're used to having to do everything yourself. So that's just one more thing that you do, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, actually, I can't do this very well, can I? And then they need to call you.
Right, and I tell them, and sometimes they want to know what you cost, and they're shopping around for the cheapest attorney. And I said, well, if you were having heart surgery, you wouldn't care what you paid that heart surgeon. You would just get the best heart surgeon you could find.
Right.
And so it's a huge mistake for them to hire somebody on the basis of cost, because what happens is the guys that lowball them, they don't do the work, and they never get the job done because they're not paid enough. It takes a lot of work with the IRS to get this done properly and to get your client the best possible resolution.
What would you say are the most common pain points your clients experience or are experiencing when they first come to you?
Well, they're afraid of losing their business. They're afraid of losing their income. They're afraid of losing their assets. They're afraid of losing their marriage. It's everything. They're afraid that their business is going to be shut down. They're afraid that their bank account's going to be wiped out, that their wages are going to be garnished. And so they just want to get that back on track so that they don't have that fear anymore. I mean, they're probably going up against the most terrifying agency in the federal arsenal. And then when they show up on their doorsteps, and I've had people, I said, you don't owe enough to hire me. And they go, we don't care what we have to pay you. They showed up. They scared the holy bejesus out of me, and we don't care. We don't ever want to talk to them again. So there's this huge fear that they're going to come, scare the holy living hell out of them, and they don't want that to happen. They want to stay as far away as possible. And in fact, we tell them, do not contact the IRS while we represent you, for two reasons. Number one, we don't know what's going on. And number two, what happens invariably is the client says, well, this is what the discussion was about. The IRS says it was something else. And I can't argue with them because I wasn't privy to the conversation.
So how serious does a tax problem need to be to justify someone hiring an attorney? How would one know, oh boy, I better go get an attorney? Because you mentioned you don't really have enough. You don't really need this service, but
we have certain questions that we ask during the intake process to see if they qualify. One of the areas is they need to owe at least $10,000. Or have they been levied, or have there been threats of levy? Do they have a revenue officer in their case? Do they have unfiled tax returns? The other biggest category are they under audit? And so if any of those things are happening to them, then they obviously need our services.
Okay. Is there any situations, do you ever get in situations where people come to you and then you're like, whoa, trust me, you definitely don't need to go this far. You're coming to me way too early. And then where they can.
Well, I just talked to a gentleman today that we represent before the IRS, and he got some notices from the state of Missouri, but he only owes them $6,500. And I said, given my fees, it's not worth your while to hire me. And I told him what to do and how to talk to the Missouri Department of Revenue when he calls them to get his problem rectified.
Okay. And that was a situation where he can do it himself. He doesn't need to go back to anybody else to get someone else to help him or to represent him.
Right. Because, if it's just to pay the money back, why pay me instead of paying them if it's that little? Right. But the good news is when people hire us, 85 to 90% of my clients, maybe more, never pay back the full amount.
Wow.
10 to 15%, maybe a little more, never pay a dime. But you have to prove to the IRS that you don't have the ability to pay it back. So we go through financial statements, bank statements, credit card statements, debit card statements. And we do all that because we got to make sure the numbers are right, because the taxpayer is submitting those figures under penalties of perjury. And guess what? You give me bad numbers, I'm going to give you bad advice. And then the other thing we can do is we can give them advice on how to structure their assets and their expenses so they get a better deal out of Uncle Sam. I'm just going to give you a small example from several years ago. A woman owed about $40,000 to the IRS, and we went through the financial statements a few times, and it showed she could pay $600 a month. Well, there's 4 years left on the statute to collect the tax, so she would have paid $30,000 about. So I called her up one day and I said, "You need to go out and buy a new car." She goes, "They're going to let me buy a new car when I owe them all this money?" I said, "You got a car with 200,000 miles. I set you up at $600 a month. The car is going to break down. You're going to pay the repair bill. You're not going to be able to pay the IRS. You wasted all your money in hiring me because the deal's going to go down the drain." So she went out, got a car payment for $500 a month, a reliable vehicle, and that's a necessary and reasonable expense in determining their ability to pay. She paid $100 a month for 4 years. So she paid less than $5,000 on a $40,000 tax debt.
Nice job, Lance.
That's what all the attorneys and the enrolled agent in my firm do.
Yeah. So how does the IRS or state tax authorities generally approach a tax resolution case?
Well, I don't know if I understand exactly what you're asking for. I can tell you the process.
Yeah,
I mean,
the process. How do they,
okay.
what is their process?
Yeah, so there's a financial statement that has to be filled out. It's their farm. We can't just submit our own forms. We have to use the IRS form. And then generally, if there's a revenue officer involved, we will send that in along with lots of documentation, bank statements, and all that. We don't generally have to do that with the automated collection system. But with the automated collection system, we call up. We get somebody different each time, and they will read to us. They will ask questions for each category of expenses and the income. And for some of those, they will ask for verification, particularly if they exceed the national standards. And then if there's money left over, the IRS wants it to pay on the tax debt.
Okay. What are the potential financial implications of not addressing tax issues promptly?
Levies, seizures. Yeah. I mean, it's never a good strategy to delay with the taxing authorities unless the collection statute is expiring. We have a guy this month. He owed about $500,000. $100,000 of that expires this month. And so if you're getting close to the end when they can no longer collect, then delay is a good strategy because they're a bureaucracy. Things fall through the cracks. And so, we can run out the clock maybe 15% of the time on people. I had a guy that owed $300,000. We ran out the clock on $270,000 and then got him into currently non-collectible on the remaining $30,000, which means he doesn't pay a dime due to his inability to pay anything at all. It's called currently non-collectible due to a financial hardship.
Okay. So you talked about delaying. Like in what situations? Because I mean, it's the IRS. They want their money, right? So they don't want you to delay. So how are you able to make that happen?
Because there's 25 million delinquent taxpayers, and by the year 2032, you're going to have 35 million delinquent taxpayers. And they don't have unlimited funding. They're strapped for resources. And because they're a bureaucracy, things just fall through the cracks from time to time. And so if they're not exerting any pressure, and we only got a year to go on the collection statute, and they owe $150,000, they're never going to collect that all. We got a guy now, he's got a year to go on about $70,000. So now they come after him to levy him. But in the automated collection system, by policy, they will not levy you if you file what's called an equivalency hearing. And guess what? It doesn't stop the running of the statute on collections. It'll be 6 months or longer before he gets a hearing. So now he's a year away. By the time we get done, they're going to have 3 months left, and they'll never collect that $70,000 against him.
So you keep saying 3 months left. What is the total time?
The general rule is that they have 10 years to collect the tax from the time the tax is assessed.
Okay.
However, there are so many things that can stop the running of the statute on collections that we have to go in and calculate for each tax period what that date is that they can no longer collect the tax. So, for example, if you do an offer in compromise, that stops the running of the statute on collections. If you file a collection due process hearing request to stop a levy, that stops the collection statute expiration process. So there are various things, filing bankruptcy as well. So there are various things that can stop the running of the statute. So it's very seldom just 10 years.
I gotcha. So what role does a tax resolution specialist or tax attorney play in resolving those tax issues? So tell me how this usually goes from the time someone comes in till the time it's resolved.
Okay, so what we do is we send in the power of attorney. That takes 2 or 3 weeks to process. We don't want to call up the IRS because that just puts our client on the radar. If there's already a deadline in place, then we will call them, but not as a normal course of action do we do that. Then we have special software that goes into the IRS systems. They don't even know I'm in there. And we're going to prepare a 10 to 15 page tax account analysis from the data and the information we get from the IRS systems. Now, the first thing that we check for is to make sure that their last 6 years' tax returns have been filed, because you can't get a resolution with the IRS until the last 6 years are in fact filed. So if they are filed, then we'll send them the financial statements to fill out. If they're not filed, then we're going to get the returns prepared for them and sent in to the IRS, because the IRS always wants current information. So we're not going to have them do the financial information now because the tax return isn't ready to be filed yet. We have to prepare it. So we'll send it to them once we have filed that tax return, because the IRS always wants current information.
Okay, makes sense. So what's the best way, or what should people look for when looking to find a reputable tax resolution professional? Like, what are the, what are the do's and don'ts when someone's looking for someone?
Well, I think people need to do their due diligence, and I think they know, and they need to look at their Google reviews. We're a 4.7 out of 5 in Google reviews in St. Louis. We're a 4.9 out of 5 in Nashville, Tennessee. They need to see if they've authored any books. I've done that. I won an award in 2016. I was voted top practitioner by the American Society of Tax Problem Solvers. I've given speeches around the country. In the last 9 months, I've been featured in a number of national publications and magazines. And I believe it was in April of this year where I was quoted in an article in Forbes magazine. So they need to look at their track record. They need to look at their testimonials. They need to look at their reviews. They need to go to their website and see about all the information they can gather there. And we've appeared on all the national channels and that. So, they need to make sure that the firm has a great reputation.
Good advice. Well, thanks for tuning in to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up on all things tax law. Lance, so great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.